It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. This is a Krishnamurti quote that I'm certain a lot of you have actually heard. In many ways, our society is simply not well. Our species is incredibly sick. And I want to share with you a lot of ways in which that is, and how that's kind of manifesting in our society. And I find this to be an extremely important topic to learn because we're never really taught about it. And all this stuff really impacts our lives. And if you're not aware of these sort of traps, you can easily fall into them and kind of get stuck in them for literally decades. And these traps kind of just like suck your life energy out of you and kind of leave you feeling numb, dull, and really disconnected from yourself and just overall sick. And on this note, I also want to say that although this can kind of come across as like a sort of rant against society, I don't really want you to interpret it like that. I don't want you to walk away from this video and have a lot of hatred for mankind, hatred for society, a lot of just anger for the world. This isn't really the point of the video. The point of this video is more so to just kind of expose how low consciousness of a species we really are, and especially if you're on the path of raising your consciousness, how this can impact you and how to kind of just avoid traps, how to just avoid a lot of this stuff, right? That's really the point of this video. It's not to hate the world. It's not like, it's none of that stuff, right? All of that kind of mindset, it's fueled from sickness inside of you, essentially. If you're going to use this information to hate society and hate that person and hate that, and that's terrible and that's the worst, etc., you're falling into a trap. So that's not really the point. The point is to kind of just like highlight certain aspects of life and ensure that you kind of don't fall into those traps and you're kind of just aware of them. And if you're in those traps, to kind of point you to the fact that you're stuck in them and to, get out. So the first area in which I really want to be talking about is career and work life. And of course, career is basically how we survive in the modern world. This is how we make money. We use it to buy food, shelter, etc. Right? Very basic. This is like modern day hunting, right? You know how many, many years ago our ancestors, when they lived in tribes, they had to go out and they had to hunt, right? They had to kill stuff to eat and, provide for the tribe and the family and their friends, the community that they lived in, etc. Modern day career is basically the equivalent of that, right? And it's kind of a less brutal version of that, of course. It's definitely more conscious than what it was many, many years ago. And humanity slowly raises its consciousness over time, but in many ways, it's still profoundly sick today. So I want to just talk about one very specific point and move on to the next in a relatively sort of like linear like fashion. So overworking is a massive aspect of modern day careers, 40-hour work weeks. A lot of this is blatantly exhausting. A lot of this leaves us with little to no time to do anything. People come home, they're exhausted, they don't make enough money, right? They're fed up, they don't feel valued at their job, etc. And what this kind of does to a person's mind over time is it makes them a very bitter person. And I'm not really trying to put the blame on that individual person, nor am I really trying to just blame all of society, but it's in ways, it's a combination of the individual and the collective that we exist within. It's both, right? You got to really integrate these two. So in many ways, the work that we actually do, how much people actually receive, it's blatantly sickening. The work we actually do feeds into sickness and low consciousness. Like the things that we actually produce are just blatantly low consciousness. Some examples of that are junk food, a lot of the entertainment that we consume, a lot of the media that we consume. Social media is generally pure garbage for the most part. And a lot of it is blatantly wasteful, right? It doesn't actually help our planet as well, which I'm going to be talking about the environment later on. But it also doesn't really help our planet because we're kind of, in a sense, so selfish and self-centered as a species that we're struggling to actually include the environment within our sense of self, within our sense of care as a species. We're literally struggling to do this, and this is causing all sorts of this, emerging worldview of living in harmony with nature is causing all sorts of struggle within society. And it's really hard for people to actually make that leap, right? I'm really not trying to say that in any kind of like judgmental way. It's genuinely hard for people who aren't at that level of consciousness already to make that leap, right? Because if you're a person who cares about the environment, you have to understand that you are at a level of consciousness that's capable of doing that. Not everyone is at a level of consciousness that's capable of genuinely caring about the environment. Not everyone is actually at a level of consciousness where their sense of identity is intertwined with the environment. To learn more about this, learn spiral dynamics, learn ego development theory. There's an actual progression to human values, to the human sense of identity, to human morals, etc. So it's easy to take for granted your level of consciousness when you aren't really aware of various levels of human development. And when you take for granted your level of consciousness, it's kind of just like this way of, getting upset. It can easily become this way of getting upset at other people. Like, why don't you care about the environment? Why don't you care about this? Why don't you, want to save the whales? Right? But when someone's living paycheck to paycheck, when they can't pay their rent, when they can't buy food, when they can't get their needs met, it's psychologically impossible to care about the environment because you're so concerned on your own individual survival, because you have to, or else you're going to die. So low consciousness businesses, moving on from my previous point of the work we do is sick and overall low consciousness. Low consciousness businesses exploit you, right? Junk food, social media, things like this. A lot of this stuff creates addiction, and addiction is highly profitable. Addiction is a very good business model if all your business cares about is maximizing profits and to hell with everything else. Moving on from that is overall, the way that we create wealth as a species is again very sickening. It's blatantly unconscious. It's harmful to human health. It's harmful to the health of other living creatures. It's harmful to the environment. It serves a top few percent of people. Basically, wealth creation and distribution are again just very low consciousness. They really this current model, this framework that our society is really using, frequently prioritizes short-term gains at the expense of people and the planet, creating a lot of unnecessary suffering and environmental degradation. Moving on is that our whole work life is very overly masculine, meaning that it's very kind of just like I don't want to use the word habitual, but it's like overly structured, and it's lacking in femininity. It's lacking in rest. It's lacking in emotional intelligence. It's lacking in an ability to be present. It's more so just like work, 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 go, 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 do, do, do. And that's great until it's actually lacking in harmony with its opposite. Because in this world, there's duality. There's things that exist relative to what they are not. Rest in relation to work. Doing in relation to being. And when all this stuff isn't balanced well, it creates sickness. Sickness is literally imbalance within a system. When a system is breaking down and it's losing balance, this is sickness, right? When your body, your arm physically breaks, there's an imbalance in the system and there's a problem now, right? So to actually be well means to maintain balance within a system. The body's a system, the mind is a system. There's hundreds of thousands of interconnected systems that are giving rise to our experience of life in the modern world. Moving on is just relationships. We're very ignorant about how to even get our needs met in relationships. There's no real education on this, especially growing up in school. It's very predictable that a lot of people will have very poor relationships because we're never taught about them. We're not really taught the practical skills. We're not taught like the theory, the psychology of it. We're not taught about masculine and feminine archetypes. And once you actually read a lot of books on relationships, the importance of this like immediately clicks. It's just blatantly obvious, right? As someone who's read dozens of books on relationships, masculine and feminine archetypes, the needs of both, the evolutionary psychology, spiritual points of view, etc., it's blatantly obvious that without having a good understanding, a good mental model of relationships, your ability to navigate them isn't going to be very good. And there's going to be a lot of overall problems that simply don't really need to exist, but they're created due to low consciousness and ignorance. These two basically just kind of go together. So there's a deep ignorance about how to get our needs met, how relationships work. And there's a lot of trauma in relation to other people that gets built in early childhood. In fact, most of our trauma is constructed in relation to other people growing up. And we live in a world that's highly ignorant of that. So in relation to other people, right, a lot of those early wounds are going to get triggered. So it's only natural that in relation to other people, we can expect our own trauma to be triggered, especially in an intimate relationship, but even in relationships of various kinds, right? I work one-to-one with people. I do one-to-one coaching. I have to actually be on the lookout for this in my own profession. So our intimate relationships bring that out quite a lot, and we don't even really know what to do with it, how to heal. This isn't really talked about. This isn't shared in any mainstream anything, basically at all. Unfortunately, a lot of people are left to go on YouTube and find people like me who have just been reading and really educating themselves seriously. And this is a lot of the best education that we actually have on this kind of stuff, not to mention books, right? And a lot of this requires a lot of individual responsibility, which is nice. I'm all for individual responsibility, but I'm also for making things easier for mankind. Because it's hard to find good information. It's hard to find helpful information. It's actually very challenging, right? As someone who's read hundreds and hundreds of books, it's not an easy thing to determine what book is actually really going to help me. What book is actually high quality information, what book isn't, right? So it's nice that we can take individual responsibility and learn for ourselves, but simultaneously, we have a world that's very disconnected from community, from the collective, from simply caring about each other and the needs of each other. We live in a highly individualistic world, which has a lot of ups and it has a lot of inevitable downs, right? Because like I said, it's oh my God, it's existing in relation to its opposite, individualism to collectivism. And when it's not properly balanced, right? And balance here doesn't just mean right in the middle. Sometimes in a particular context, balance can mean 70-30. Sometimes it can mean 60-40. Sometimes it can even mean 10-90. It's about attunement to the present circumstances. When it's not balanced properly and there's a lack of attunement to the needs of people, society, etc., sickness occurs. So like I said, sickness is due to imbalances within a system. Moving on is politics. This is just pure blatant garbage. A lot of the information that gets consumed through all forms of media, whether it's mainstream and alternative, most of this is blatant garbage. Most of this is sickening. Most of this is just dogmatic. Most of this is ideological. And most of this is built on a lack of understanding of how culture and humans actually develop, which in my worldview is actually essential for making good sense of politics. I'm talking about spiral dynamics, ego development theory, moral development theory, integral theory by Ken Wilber. You need to have an idea of where we came from, where we're at, and where we're going. You need to have an idea of what levels of consciousness and value systems are we really at, what's all the blocks and the limitations of where we're at, what causes us to backslide, and how do we move forward in a sustainable way that doesn't cause a crazy amount of backlash. So there's no big picture understanding in any real mainstream institution whatsoever. This doesn't mean that by definition alternative is better, because a lot of alternative stuff is blatant garbage as well. I'm really encouraging you to actually build an understanding for yourself. Not listening to just what I say, not listening to what your alternative media guy says, not listening to what the mainstream media says, but see this library behind me, right? I encourage you to really care about studying and understanding, and truth just for the sake of truth, understanding for the sake of understanding, moving beyond just your idea of how you want things to be and how it should be, and more so into just a very honest and open inquiry into just what is really true, how does this actually work, etc. Moving on is diet and well-being. So a lot of our food is blatantly full of heavy metals, right? Pops, soda, whatever you want to call it, fast food, a lot of our fish, all sorts of stuff is full of heavy metals. Not to mention that a lot of our foods are on purpose designed to be addictive so that people get addicted to them, right? And they keep buying it. Like I said, addiction's a very good business model, right? It's very good for profits. And it's especially good for a business that just doesn't give a damn about anything else other than profits, right? From the point of view of that business, right? That's how it survives. It's good because what's good is going to be relative to what helps that business to survive, right? And it might not be good for the rest of society, but from the point of view, from the selfish point of view of that business, that's good. So addiction is good for profits, right? Fast food, social media, I can go on. So lack of education on how to eat for our body's needs. This isn't really taught once again. This is not really focused on at all. And people actually really underestimate the power of diet. Most people do not eat very clean diets, right? And I'm really not trying to insult people or anything like that. It's just a clear observation. Most people do not really eat a lot of very clean foods. Right? And this makes them sick, of course. And then when you're kind of stuck within that state, you don't really know any other states of being. You don't know any other ways of being, so you take your way of being for granted. You don't know the effects of a healthier diet on your mind, on your relationships, on your career, on your productivity, on your overall sense of fulfillment. You don't know that because you're stuck within that particular state, and it's hard to break out of it. A lot of these patterns like to reinforce themselves and survive, right? They have this sort of drive to continuously survive. So there's a lack of education on eating for your body's needs. Plus, in our culture, we eat for entertainment. We eat for escapism. We eat for pleasure, not nutrition and well-being. This is a very common theme. We eat to escape our emotions because we're emotionally unintelligent. We eat just because it tastes good, not for nutrition, not because we're actually hungry, right? We suck at attuning to ourselves. We're blatantly awful at this in our society. And if we want to be a healthy species, these are things that we're going to have to learn if we really want to even just continue surviving as a species. Because, of course, when we're sick, that manifests in all sorts of strange ways. Conflicts on a small scale from within your body, right? To conflicts at a slightly larger scale within your relationship or household, to at an even larger scale within societies and across countries. So there's an ignorance about mental health as well and how to simply feel good and just feel healthy. There's an ignorance around meditation. There's an ignorance around emotional well-being. There's an ignorance around what a high-quality information diet looks like. And in my worldview, this is dominantly information from spiral dynamics tier 2, stages yellow and turquoise. Or what is that in ego development theory? The autonomous stage, the construct-aware stage, and then even the third tier, the unitive stage. So it's dominantly information coming from higher levels of development that are less dogmatic, more open, more integral, able to organize reality in complex ways so that energy can flow freely and smoothly and in healthy ways. But there's a lot more to say about that, and I can't really go into too much detail in this video. I'm trying to give you a little bit of a bigger picture here. Next is our environment. So of course, we just blatantly dominate and abuse nature. And there's, like I mentioned previously, there's our overall inability to just simply care about it because it's alive. Not because it has any kind of, value for us, just because it's alive, right? We usually will care about things that just serve our own particular ego's needs, which is okay. It's survival, right? That's just like a normal thing. But we need this ability to actually simply care about, let's say, the environment just simply because it exists, not because it serves us in any kind of way, not because it's a means to an end, but just because it's alive. And again, we're really struggling with this one as a species to just expand our sense of care for the environment, because this is a world-centric worldview or sense of identity, which is actually quite rare. It's not the most common level of consciousness on the planet, right? Again, the human identity and sense of self goes through stages of development and eventually reaches a point where it can actually expand its sense of self to care about the environment. It usually starts with just me and my needs and my tribe and my small community and my country. And then it's able to move beyond that to the world, and then even beyond that to the very nature of being itself, to the actual cosmos, to just pure consciousness itself. And I really just recommend studying ego development theory to learn more about that. Moving on is just heavy metals. So each generation actually passes down heavy metals. And over 60 people existed in your last 5 generations, which is quite a lot of people, right? That's quite a lot of buildup of toxins, including the fact that a lot of these toxins are in the food that we eat, which is getting really bad nowadays, and in the air we breathe, which is also quite bad nowadays. Not to mention certain jobs and environments are going to have more than that than others, right? So it gets stuck in our bodies, and there's a lack of information on how to cleanse it in our culture. There's no real care about this. You're not going to go on the news and find it. You're not really going to find it in schools either. Again, for some reason, it's just people like me on YouTube, and like maybe some people in some books, but those books are hard to find. And how are you even supposed to know that they exist, right? It's like kind of strange. It's sort of like kind of alternative. That it's it's people like this that are sharing this kind of information. Right? And it's kind of harder and harder for a lot of people. This makes it harder and harder for a lot of people to get their hands on information that is straight up life-saving for them, because a lot of these heavy metals, they actually impact your energy levels, your clarity, right? A lot of people have brain fog due to heavy metals. They impact a lot of your organ health, your psychological states. I believe, you know how whenever you go to fill up gas, it says unleaded gasoline, right? It used to be leaded gasoline, and then we were able to track that lead leads to higher amounts of aggression, I believe, and violence. So then we made it unleaded gasoline, right? Because turns out having lead inside of your body isn't actually a very healthy thing, and actually impacts you in ways beyond just your physical body, because your physical body, your emotions, your mind, your soul, your spirit, consciousness, this is all totally intertwined, each thing being inseparable from each other. So what do you do now? What do you really do now, right? I'm not urging you to hate society or hate this group of people or that group of people. I'm not urging you to go to war against X, Y, and Z and blah, blah, blah. I'm urging you to just care about understanding. I'm urging you to actually educate yourself and just care, right? And we can fall into this kind of delusion of just thinking that, I'm educated. But how come everyone says that they're intelligent? Everyone says that they're educated, right? It's easily a self-deception. I encourage you to really study every single thing that I've went through. What does a healthy career look like? Right? What's a healthy amount of work hours per week for me? What kind of job fits my psychology well, fits my emotional system well, right? It's like no one's going to kind of build that for you, right? You have to learn about it. You have to do a lot of trial and error in your own life to really figure this stuff out. Kind of like how a scientist runs experiments, he gets the result, runs experiments, gets the result, right? Kind of has to have this sort of trial and error approach mixed with continuous lifelong learning. So studying career, for example, studying relationships, aim to read at least 20 books on relationships in your life if you want to have top tier relationships, right? This is your life that we're talking about, right? What kind of relationships do you want to have with people? I assume you want to have the best ones possible. Why would you not? So aim to really get clear on some of this stuff. Masculine and feminine archetypes, the work of David Data. Psychotherapy in relationships, because you're working with people's, trauma and their mind and their neuroses in a relationship, right? Really just getting a good idea of the complexity of what's going on here. Moving on is just having a good idea of your own diet and well-being, studying a lot of different perspectives on diets, experimenting with things that really work for you, looking into heavy metal detox. This is really going to help you out quite a lot. On top of that, raising your consciousness. Right? Learn spiral dynamics, learn ego development theory, learn how to actually raise your development as a human being. Life gets better when you actually raise your consciousness. You become more whole, you become more integrated, you can function in the world far better. Suffering decreases, and your ability to just simply navigate existence increases, which is going to help you to get a lot of your needs met. It's going to reduce a lot of unnecessary suffering that really exists in your life. So intentionally learn lots of information. Right? You don't have to read as much as I have here behind me, but it helps. It helps to aim to read 100 books, 200 books. That's really not a lot of books in the time span of your entire life. Right? The average human is, let's say, living for 80 years, right? 80 to 90 years. I think in the USA it might be 76, 77. Not quite sure. Don't quote me on that one. We'll just estimate between 80 and 90, generally across maybe like North America and Europe. What are you going to do with these 80 to 90 years? What kind of person do you really want to be? Have a vision for your life and don't betray that vision. Have some integrity when it comes to your values, when it comes to your well-being, when it comes to the work you do. What kind of value do you provide for humanity? Is it making us sick, or is it actually helping us to expand our consciousness? This doesn't mean you have to be a spiritual teacher. This maybe means you open up a more conscious restaurant, more conscious healthcare, right? This is some kind of visionary stuff. More conscious X, Y, and Z. Right? You open up a more conscious business. Right? Again, it's relatively visionary, but you have 80 to 90 years here. I'm urging you to have a vision for your life and what you really want it to look like and how you want to be impacting the world and the people around you, ideally in healthy and conscious ways, so that by the time you're done here, the world is looking like a little bit of a better place than it was when you first arrived. There's a good quote. I'm going to try my best to remember it. He who plants trees knowing that he will never sit in their shade has just began to understand the meaning of life. That's it for this video. If you're interested in working one-to-one with me, you can apply to do so. Link is in the pinned comment. Take it easy.